Let's talk to this now. In a moment, we'll be joined by the Democratic Alliance's Helen, Zille, as well as ANC's Dugmore. And they're talking to us about a call that has been made several times now. And I believe there's a formation that has been put together by the Democratic Alliance looking at the devolution of policing powers. This, they say, could provide a greater scope for combating crime, but also it would help the municipalities with investigations and in prioritizing the interests of those municipalities as far as policing is concerned. So let's get into that conversation now and welcome to the chat with us today the DA Federal Council Chairperson Helen, Zille, as well as the ANC's Western Cape Legislature leader Cameron Dugmore. Good evening and thank you very much for your time and for joining us tonight here on In Focus. Helen, let's begin with you. What is this new formation all about? You're lobbying political parties to come on board and support you in this call?
Well, let me first say that this is not an initiative of the Democratic Alliance. It's an initiative of a large number of organizations, several political parties, a range of community-based organizations, non-governmental organizations, civil society groupings, who all believe that powers should be devolved to the lowest effective level, provinces and municipalities, where they have the power to implement those functions of state.
Yeah.
We have a failing national government. That is apparent across every single state sector. And if power continues to be centralized the way it is, then government will fail everywhere in South Africa. However, we do have competent local authorities, quite a number of them, and certainly we have a very capable government in the Western Cape. And the people who vote for competence and capacity in government deserve to have the competence and the delivery that they voted for. Now, obviously, this is not only for the people of the Western Cape. We would like to have these powers devolved everywhere where there are competent and capable governments. This is crucial for the whole of South Africa. So the ANC has led us into a failed national state, and more and more groupings, political parties, civil society organizations want to make South Africans immune to state failure. They want to give people a barrier to feeling the full catastrophe of the failed state. And as you have seen, for example, in electricity, that is something that people deserve to be shielded from. Another issue that we're looking at very closely, of course, is policing. The National Police Services under Becky Cele has certainly failed to combat crime. The criminals are winning the war. And where we have metropolitan police, especially in the city of Cape Town, and where we have the additional boots on the ground of the LEAP officers, crime has fallen very dramatically.
Yeah.
Although the Metropolitan Police Service in the city of Cape Town is much, much smaller than the SAPS, they have greater confidence of the people of the city, and they are much more effective in bringing down crime. Where they are deployed, crime has come down quite extraordinarily.
Yeah.
40% reduction in Kraaifontein.
Yeah.
24% in Yanga, 21% in Khayelitsha, reduction in crime. So these are extraordinary statistics that the National Police Department has never achieved.
Okay.
And now we want more powers and management of SAPS as a whole to be devolved to the province and the city.
We're going to come in a moment, Helen, to what is happening in Kraaifontein and what some are saying about what is happening in Kraaifontein and what you are saying. But let's give the ANC an opportunity to ventilate as well. Cameron Dugmore, good to have you. Thank you very much for your time. It seems the current strategy against crime, primarily in provinces, in local municipalities, is not working. And what I hear now, it's political parties, not just the Democratic Alliance idea, but other parties as well, are feeling that the current policy direction on policing of the ANC is the one that is resulting in the stagnation as far as fighting crime in the country. What do you say to that?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think the reality is that any reading of the Constitution, particularly Section 206, outlines very clearly what the powers of a provincial government are in regard to policing, and also makes it very clear that local authorities are entitled to, as Joburg, Durban, Cape Town and other cities have done, and municipalities, to establish municipal police focusing on law enforcement issues. So those powers are there. Helen Zille was the Premier of the Western Cape, and not once did she use a particular power in 2076, which actually allows a provincial executive to approach the national cabinet if they lose confidence in the provincial commissioner of the police. Not once in her time did she even utilize that power. And it's actually the second thing that so the first thing I want to say is there are powers that provinces have, that local authorities have. Secondly, what crime fighting needs is a cooperative approach. And Helen Zille and the DA actually became what we call the champions of blame and complain. They specifically undermined national government and actually created a conflict situation. And what you need when you fight crime, you need what our Constitution also says, which this particular group of right-wing racist parties are actually coming together, because that's what this is all about. Cape independence, the Republic of the Western Cape, clothed now in issues such as devolution. The reality is that the Constitution says you must cooperate. And through the DA seeking votes in an opportunistic way then, and also now, you have a situation where the conflict that they create with the national government actually undermines the fight against crime. The Police Act is very clear. We need community police for it. What happens in the Western Cape? The provincial department undermines that. They support neighborhood watches. They don't give finances to the community police forum. You can speak to any community police forum members. They will tell you what the Western Cape is doing. In our province, we have gangsterism. You're not going to solve gangsterism simply by in terms of policing. You need that, but you actually need programs that actually work with young people and give them alternatives. Yeah. But the DA doesn't invest in the townships of the Western Cape. The reality, the figures Helen Zille quotes in Kraaifontein and Khayelitsha Nyanga. Let's look at the extra police, South African police that have been deployed in those areas, and the active participation, despite the DA wanting to undermine community police for us. So what we are saying in summary, this is a smokescreen for right-wing and racist parties who oppose things like redress, who oppose things like land redistribution. They don't focus on those issues. They come together. And
we don't want to digress. We want to stay with the policing issue, Cameron.
Yes. So and they're working against national, and that's part of the problem.
Okay.
They're fighting national instead of working together.
Let's stay with that. Helen, you are working against national, and that is part of the problem as far as policing is concerned. Let's look at those numbers. You're saying that the leap has been quite...
May I first answer Cameron?
Yes.
Well, it's very amusing because every time the ANC doesn't have an argument, they call people racist. There's nothing racist about wanting to protect communities from crime. Most people, whatever their color, want to live in a safe community. There's absolutely nothing racist about wanting more federal powers. Many countries in the world that run successfully have very strong federal devolved powers. So whenever the ANC can't argue a case or respond to an argument, they label people racist. And we're sick and tired of that. And most South Africans are seeing through that. And it's time that Cameron Dugmore improved his argument.
Let's get to the situation.
We are not fighting with the police.
Yeah.
And we are not fighting with Bheki Cele. We are fighting with the criminals.
Right.
And Bheki Cele's fight with criminals has fundamentally failed.
Let's interrogate that. You're arguing that your LEAP officers have apparently been more effective in Kraaifontein. There was a question that was put also in Parliament on this particular score, or at least in the legislature in the Western Cape. But it does seem that there was also a sizable resourcing in some areas, as many as 90 law enforcement officers. This is quite large, I'm sure you'd agree, compared to some of the adjustments that the SAPS has done in other areas. And it's not just the LEAP officers, seemingly, that have produced the results, but it is the collaboration between the SAPS and the LEAP officers on the ground that has resulted in a significant increase or reduction, shall I say, in the murder cases.
Well, of course we want to cooperate with the South African Police Service, and it is tragic that the South African Police Service has emerged as the least trusted institution in South Africa. It's the least trusted under Bheki Cele because people think it is corrupt. People think that the South African Police Service connive with the gangsters to cover up crime and to protect drug dealers. We've seen this over and over again. And we believe, therefore, that when the LEAP officers are in communities, it helps shield people and helps put more eyes on the ground and in communities to prevent police corruption.
Yeah.
So, of course, we want to work with the SAPS. We don't want to be independent from them. But we also believe that they should be under the managerial control, the SAPS should, of Cape Town and the Western Cape, so that we'll get efficiency and lack of corruption and proper policing throughout.
Yeah, the president has simply said to you that the police minister doesn't have powers to give. Basically.
But he does. But he does.
This is what the president says. He says the policing powers and therefore cannot assign or transfer the responsibility of the National Commissioner to control and manage the single National Police Service to a member of the Provincial Executive Council or to a municipal council. Such transfer will be inconsistent with the provisions as contained in Chapter 11 of the Constitution.
Right. Let me read from Chapter 11 right now. The National Police Service must be structured to function in the national, provincial, and, where appropriate, local spheres of government. Then, under critically Section 256, it says, the national government and provincial government must assign to a municipality, by agreement and subject to any condition, any function and matter listed in Part A of Schedule 4 of the Constitution, which is basically includes police. So it's simply a matter of political will. If the national minister wishes to pass an act in Parliament and assign that function to metropolitan governments or to provincial governments, there is nothing to stop him.
All right, we'll come back, Cameron. I'll give you an opportunity. I want to give you enough time. I'm pushed for time now for break, so let me take a break. When I come back, I'll come back with you because you want to jump in on the interpretation of that 205 subsection 1. In Focus continues in a moment tonight, and the conversation, of course, is on the parties who have come together now to push for the devolution of powers, policing powers in particular, saying this could certainly provide greater scope as far as combating crime is concerned. What are your thoughts? 072-110-5584, or you can tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. Back with you tonight here on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. Cameron Dugmore of the ANC in the Western Cape, as well as the DA's Federal Council Chairperson, Helen Zille, still with us tonight in conversation. We are, of course, talking about the call for the devolution of policing powers that many say could certainly provide greater scope for combating crime. And this time around, those who are calling for it in the Western Cape. Cameron, before the break, Helen Zille says Section 205, subsection 1 of the Constitution provides for a structure to function in the national, in the provincial, as well as in the local sphere of power. There's nothing that prevents that from happening.
Yeah. I think, as I explained, the law provides for municipal police. They operate. They are there. It's actually, and secondly, as I've said, and Helen Zille hasn't responded to this question, she had the powers when she was the Premier to utilize the existing powers for provinces. Provinces have a say in the appointment of the Commissioner of Police. It has to be done in consultation with the province. As a Premier, Helen Zille could have indicated in terms of 207 that they'd lost. The province now has lost confidence in the Provincial Police Commissioner. They've never done that. So the powers are there which outline the functions of a province. Metros and municipalities are allowed. But the problem that we have here, the biggest threat to actually fighting crime and the causes of crime is the fact, and I didn't say raising police powers is racist. I said the parties involved here, AfriForum, Cape Independent, Freedom Front Plus, DA, all of whom oppose redress and actually have a racist agenda. Why don't they focus on an issue in the Constitution about advancing land reform? No, it's about preserving and protecting their elite situation. That's what's going on. And so firstly, they're not using the powers in the Constitution effectively. Helen Zille herself did not use those powers when she was Premier. She never once called for the removal of it. She talks about management. The provincial commissioner is the management of the police. And the reality is, to deal with gangsterism and drugs, you need to invest in those communities. Her claim about Kraaifontein and Nangi is actually a lie, because those were the results of deploying South African police who, and people want to cooperate together. It's actually Helen Zille and these parties that are divisive that want to create this fight with National and actually worsen the situation on the ground. People of the Western Cape suffer because of the fights that Helen Zille, for political reasons, chooses to fight. The Constitution says cooperate, work together. Why do they then undermine community police for it? This is a political agenda which actually doesn't help the fight against crime. We must amend the Police Act. We must deal with corruption issues in the police. But to, like she does even tonight, throw out this label that actually all police are corrupt. She says there are these perceptions. That's actually undermining the police. And Helen Zille must work together and not undermine the fight against crime.
Are you denying the fact that the current strategies against crime are primarily dictated by the head office in Pretoria? And yes, Helen Zille probably as Premier could have made suggestions in terms of what to prioritize, but the National is not obliged to listen to that suggestion.
No, they are. If you look at the Constitution directly in terms of police policy, there is a clear provision in the Section 206, Section 3 to 4 about consulting with provinces about policing needs. The provincial commissioner comes to the Western Cape Legislature. The reports, we can ask for reports as the Legislature. We are involved in actually appointing through the provincial cabinet the commissioners. So the management is a direct say. I think the problem here is what Helen Zille and this group of right-wing forces are doing is to actually intensify a fight under their narrative that everything has failed in this country, which we know is not true. There are serious issues to address. So they want to create a conflict which at the end of the day undermines the fight against crime. Here she has gone on national TV tonight as Helen Zille and labeled all the police as corrupt, saying there are these perceptions. How can you then say you're not fighting the police when you drop comments like that? It's about undermining. We must work together. Crime is more than just police. It has to be about the socio-economic conditions, building youth opportunities, transforming the economy, not having the economy like it is in the Western Cape controlled, not having 3% of agricultural land in the Western Cape owned by black people, African and colored, the rest by what? Helen Zille never says anything about that. They oppose the minimum wage. They actually work to intensify poverty amongst communities who've been unfairly discriminated against and then just want to blame the police. It's about dealing with the real issues, not fighting for political reasons with the national government, which is what this group is doing, and they are not going to succeed. It's clear. I'll
give you a chance to respond. I'm sure there are a number of issues that you want to address there, Helen, but one in particular is this question that as the Premier, you had all the power in a process called consultation where you could, for example, highlight what you would want to be prioritized or what you would want National to take into consideration when it comes to the metros and the provincial strategies.
Well, I don't know where we begin with a pack of lies, such as what Cameron Dugmore has put out there. First of all, we used all our powers that we had at the time. We certainly liaised on the appointment of provincial commissioners. I certainly objected when things went wrong. And I fought all the way to the Constitutional Court against the Minister of Police to get the right to establish a commission of inquiry to find out why the people of Khayelitsha had lost faith in the police so fundamentally that they had resorted to necklacing people to deal with criminals in their community. So I fought with every bit of power that we could use then in terms of the framework. But in terms of the Constitution, it's entirely possible to give more powers to provinces and to give more powers to municipalities if there is a will to do so. And if there is a will to pass legislation to give more powers to provincial commissioners and to make them answerable unto the management of a province and a municipality. So that's perfectly possible within the Constitution. Cameron Dugmore has no idea what I did as the Premier. We liaised on all our powers. We put in our policing priorities every year. We did everything that we could within that framework. And that is why I know that this framework is not sufficient and that the Constitution enables far more powers to be devolved. And that is what we want. It is frankly disgusting for him to twist my words and to say I'm calling all police corrupt. What I'm saying is the fact of scientific surveys that the police are the least trusted institution in South Africa because of perceptions of corruption. That is a fact. If he's going to get insulted by facts, then he's going to have a very difficult time living in South Africa. The DA has got no fight with the police. We've got a massive fight with corruption, and we've got a massive fight with criminals. The ANC is a criminal syndicate. That is what it has been revealed to be under the Zondo Commission. And they are corrupt from top to bottom. And that is why they don't like us exposing that. And that is why they don't like the fact that when we have a police service like we do in the Metro Police, they are far more effective, man for man and woman for woman, than the South African Police Service. Yeah. We would love the South African Police Service to be fully functional and fully effective. And we've been working for that all the time, and we'll believe they'll be much happier and much more effective in answering to a provincial commissioner under the control of the Democratic Alliance. It's also a complete lie to say that we do not invest in poor communities. Unlike the ANC, we do not steal public money, and we actually do invest massively in poor communities.
So what Cameron is saying, devolution is not the way to go, but what you do need is active support for community policing forum, active support for communities where there is less visibility of policing, stronger, for example, pursuing of anti-gang units, special task teams that are being sent in all affected communities. Something that from the Khayelitsha Policing Forum, for example, my conversation with them is something that is currently not being done.
Yeah.
Well, we train and support neighborhood watchers everywhere.
And you undermine
right
CPFs every day. You
we
undermine
certainly
CPFs
do not.
Every
The ANC tries to politicize CPFs. That's your problem. You turn them into fronts for the ANC. That's the problem.
All right, Helen, I'll give you an opportunity. Let's give Cameron a chance to respond.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. If I could just conclude. The reality is the ANC has acknowledged issues which not only affect us, but other organizations, the private sector. That's why there's a Zondo Commission. That's why the NPA has been strengthened. That's why the SIU has been strengthened. So no one can excuse corruption from whatever quarter it comes. I'm saying, number one, the DA is not using the powers they currently have in terms of Section 206, 3 to 6. Helen Zille, not once when she was the Premier, utilized a provision to actually try and remove a provincial commissioner. That's a fact. In the Khayelitsha Commission, her own city of Cape Town, run by the DA, has not implemented. Don't interrupt me, Helen. You're not in the DA caucus meeting here, bossing everyone around. You're not a boss. You want to boss your coalition partners. That's why you're losing in Joburg. Now the issue is this: that in Khayelitsha, the city of Cape Town was supposed to provide lighting out of that commission. They haven't done what they're supposed. Why are the cameras in the CBD of Cape Town, but not in Khayelitsha? That is the skewed service delivery of a racist DA, which doesn't actually believe in redress, even though our constitution says that those people that suffered unfair discrimination, in other words, black people, let's be clear, African, colored, Indian people who suffered the unfair discrimination should be getting more resources in Khayelitsha by the city. But J.P. Smith stands up and says that he's going to impound 50 taxis for every bus that is burned. We condemn the burning of buses, but how can you, as the head of municipal police, actually threaten all taxis? And once again, don't discriminate between those that are creating violence and those that are trying to get operating licenses. So this is what they want to do. So we say, don't undermine, work together. Use the powers that you have and actually understand this coalition for devolution for what it is, a group of right-wing, racist parties that actually have an agenda of Cape independence where they want to preserve economic privilege, power, not do anything about land, undermine the living and minimum wage. Why don't they raise those issues? They're only raising this to try and keep this Cape exit, Cape independence thing alive, because Helen Zille is worried that the Freedom Front is taking away their support in the white community, so she's now pandering to this coalition. That's what's happening here.
But are we ever going to get to a point, Cameron, where we minimize this politicking around policing and around crime? I mean, even now as we are talking, we've made this about a political debate between what the ANC thinks and what the Democratic Alliance thinks, as opposed to what current strategies against crime can we actually put in place to deal with the situation that the country is facing.
We need, maybe it's a member, Helen Zille's opportunity, but we need cooperation. I'm saying that you're absolutely right. The one thing that doesn't need to be politicized, which unfortunately this Devolution Working Group is doing that. It's not just a proper attempt. Let's focus on the Police Act, which is now being amended. What are the changes needed? Let's agree to actually build police fora like the President called for. Let's form social compacts. That is what we need to fight crime. How do we get our youth out of gangs? In practical ways, giving them bursaries, giving them opportunities. This initiative clouds the whole issue and essentially sets up a confrontation between national and provincial, whereas the Constitution says cooperative governance. I agree with you. We shouldn't be politicizing this, but this devolution initiative is actually doing exactly that. We need to sit down. She needs to leave it to her colleagues in this province, not trying to dictate to them, and work out a practical solution with communities without the antagonism and the blame and complain that her politics have been actually defined by that.
Take a break. Helen will respond when we come back. Take your thoughts as well. 072-110-5584. Tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. With municipalities as dysfunctional as they are, not my words, but the words of the Auditor General, could they be able to fight crime and at least bring innovation in the state that they are in? We'll put that question also to Helen Zille when we continue. Stay with us. Welcome back live with us tonight on In Focus, and the conversation continues. Helen Zille, Cameron Dugmore still with us, and we're talking the devolution of the policing powers in the Western Cape. A group of political parties, including AfriForum, including Freedom Front Plus, the Democratic Alliance, all pushing for the Minister of Police to give them those powers so that they could decentralize the coming up of strategies from national, so that provinces as well as local municipalities or metros could have that power to decide what would be their priorities for their localities and what resources they would channel there. That is what Helen Zille is arguing for quite strongly. Now, if you look at the functioning municipalities, of the 257 or so that we have, I think just over a handful, probably like 40 or so, are currently functional, Helen. Municipalities are dysfunctional, but you think that they could come up with innovation to fight crime?
Well, obviously, when we talk about devolution, we talk about devolution to functional levels of government. And there are functional municipalities, and people can vote for functional municipalities if they choose to do so. After the next election, several provinces are likely to fall out of ANC's hands as people vote more and more for getting competent and functioning governments. And this initiative is for the whole of South Africa. If there are functional, well-governed provinces and functional, well-governed municipalities, they deserve the fruits of their commitment to clean, functional government, and they deserve to have more and more powers to ensure that people have services and that people are safe. The first duty of a state is to ensure that people are safe. And we believe that powers should be devolved to municipalities where they can manage it, and to provinces which are going to be able to manage it more and more as they fall out of the corrupt and dysfunctional ANC's hands, and then will be able to do those powers as well. So this is for the whole of South Africa. not just the Western Cape. The DA loves the whole of South Africa. And I know that Cameron likes to look selectively at the organizations involved. This is a single issue campaign. As when I was involved in the End Conscription campaign, we ran a single issue campaign. Parties and organizations who differed on many issues could come together and support the single issue back then of ending conscription.
Yeah.
This is exactly the same. Many parties, many organizations, Ian Cameron's Action Society, SAI, many organizations, the African Christian Democratic Party, a whole range of organizations have come together to fight for greater devolution of powers to provinces and to metros where they can fulfill those functions.
Yeah.
There's nothing racist about it. There's nothing right-wing about it. It's very progressive to want devolution of power. And thereby we are not fighting the minister, and we are not fighting anybody. We are fighting the criminals. And we want that fight to be more effective.
Yeah.
Obviously, we want to cooperate with the South African police force. And it's no coincidence that where they work with the Cape's LEAP officers, they are much more efficient and effective because they combine their forces and there's good oversight and there are good checks and balances there. So obviously we want that cooperation. But we are saying that Bheki Cele and the South African police services have found in the first duty of the state to keep people safe. When I was the Premier, I fought all the way to the Constitutional Court to exercise the rights under the Constitution that we had in the province, and we never once neglected to use those rights. What we're saying is that under the Constitution, the section that Cameron has mentioned, plus Section 156 and Section 99, it is entirely possible for the National Commissioner and the National Minister to devolve, if there's political will, far more powers to where other spheres of government are competent.
So you're saying you never once thought there was a need to call for a provincial police commissioner to be fired?
We went into major debates about the role of provincial police commissioners. And we interacted a lot about them. And we were very rarely consulted properly, and we objected very profoundly to that. So we absolutely used all of our powers there. And where it was necessary to object to the appointment, sometimes a police commissioner was appointed against my objections.
Yeah.
So that is precisely why it's much more important to devolve those powers.
So that somebody doesn't think, Helen, is just a pie in the sky. Yes, I mean, when we look at the crime statistics in the country, everybody would agree we need some kind of reorganization of the policing system. That is something that is desirable for everyone. But given those powers, I mean, in practical, real sense, do you have the ability and the capability, for example, to investigate crime? Because LEAP officers do not have those powers, so they were not investigating crimes. So we can't necessarily say LEAP officers did well there. Do municipalities have those? You might be given the authority to determine which priorities will go where. And I'm surprised that this matter has still not been addressed, because we had Regan Allen here and we had the Khayelitsha Policing Forum. They raised this issue of lights. They raised this issue of cameras. And the MEC gave us his word that matter is going to be addressed. I'm surprised it still hasn't been addressed. So, I mean, do those municipalities have that capacity to be able to direct the resources where they are needed, even in communities like Khayelitsha?
Well, obviously, if you devolve the management of the police to the city and the province, and if you devolve the budgets, which must go with them, because the budget must follow the function, of course there will be the capacity. Currently, detectives sit with a caseload of 200 files each. And already the city has started investigating crime because they're pushing the envelope on what they're allowed to do. Where they do investigate crime, they have very significant success. Of course there's capacity if it's well managed, if there's no corruption, if the money isn't stolen, if the tenders and contracts aren't rigged. Absolutely there's the capacity. And where we get a function, we do it properly.
Give more authority over to the municipalities. They have more capacity, especially those with clean audits, those who are properly run with no corruption, Cameron?
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing stopping any municipality in in South Africa from establishing municipal police. That's in the Constitution, it's in the Police Act. So that is a power that already exists. I also wanted to say that in terms of 2076, a power that exists, which Helen Zille and Alan Winde have never ever used, says the following: if the provincial commissioner has lost the confidence of the provincial executive, i.e. the provincial cabinet, that executive may institute appropriate proceedings for the removal or transfer. So I'm saying there are powers in the province. Municipalities can set up, and I agree that we have to look at the capacity. But the issue of the Khayelitsha Commission, you mentioned the Khayelitsha Development Forum. That commission proposed lighting. That is a City of Cape Town function. The cameras. Why has the City of Cape Town put cameras in the CBD and not in the disadvantaged areas, Mitchell's Plain, Khayelitsha, in particularly Beacon Valley, and the working class poor sections of Mitchell's Plain? That is a function. So what we're saying, let's not politicize this. Use the powers that are actually there. There's a process now to amend the Police Act. Make your contributions in regard to that, because clearly there are dysfunctionalities that need to be addressed in the police. Use the powers, build music, but focus on the causes of crime, the poverty, the infrastructure, like a simple thing like street lighting. The lack of it adds to domestic violence. You don't need a power for the City of Cape Town to deal with lights and cameras in Khayelitsha. You don't need any other powers. You just need the political will. We are arguing that what is happening here with this devolution group is actually distracting us from building a genuine, cross-party, across different spheres of government fight against crime and the causes of crime. In our province, is it surprising that when only 3% of black people own farmland, that inequality is not going to give rise to issues of poverty, of land dispossession, when there is active opposition by these very parties, these right-wing parties, against the expropriation bill, which is now passed in the National Assembly in terms of our constitution, which will allow redress of land. Those are the issues, the causes which need to be addressed, and the powers are there. Let's not fight and create this antagonism with National. Because as much as Helen Zille says tonight they're not fighting, why doesn't she read the statements of her Premier in the Western Cape, of Regan Allen, of the predecessor, where there are huge attacks? J.P. Smith, they're attacking the National Police, they're attacking Becky Cele. Those statements show for it. So that doesn't allow us to build, use the powers. We've got extortion in the Western Cape, in the township areas, extortion of businesses, extortion of communities, right. And the Western Cape needs to focus in a cooperative way.
I've completely run out of time. I appreciate you both for coming on. Thank you very much, Cameron Dugmore, Helen Zille, and thank you very much for engaging with us tonight. Take your thoughts as well, 072-110-5584, and we'll read some of those messages in the next hour.